Okay, everyone. So good afternoon. My name is Dhananjay Kumar and I am a Microsoft MVP. I am host for today's webinar. And today we are going to learn about AngularJS. It would be in a very step-by-step manner, and we'll see that how many topics of AngularJS we can cover in next 60 minutes. So agenda of today's webinar is in front of your screen. As you see that we will first set up Visual Studio as development environment for the AngularJS development. Then we will start with AngularJS. We'll try to understand the scope object, rootScope object. Then get into controllers, nested controllers, and then we'll understand services and other components of AngularJS. This is my introduction. My name is Dhananjay Kumar. I am a Microsoft MVP. I am an Infagistic consultant. So if you have any query related to Infagistic products, you can reach me for the same. If you are on Twitter, you can follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is debug_mode. Feel free to tweet about the webinar, what you like about this webinar or what you dislike about this webinar. And I blog at debugmode.net. So I am host of your webinar and I hope I'll do justice with your time. Great. So what is AngularJS? AngularJS is, as all we know, a framework, as they call it, from Google, and it is very popular framework, and it is a client-side framework which helps us to create single-page application. For most of you who does not know what is a single-page application, in a single-page application, actually you, rather than navigating from page 1 to page 2, what you usually do in a classical web application or multiple-page application, you actually load, a view as a HTML template on a single page. Other advantage of AngularJS is that your view and your business logic are very much separated to each other, such that you can run automated UI test on your view without having any dependency on your business logic, or in simpler word, on your JavaScript code, which is dealing with your data and logic. And at the same time, you can do unit testing using any popular JavaScript unit testing framework to test your business logic and other stuff on controller and services, etc. As it is the application which we create using AngularJS are not very much they are not very much much depending on each other, so they are it is a ideal framework to create an application in test-driven development. AngularJS is used to create dynamic web page, and it can be used with any server-side technology. So rather than giving much time on what is AngularJS, if you Google about it, you will get many information what is AngularJS. But just to understand, it is a client-side framework. All the code which you write in AngularJS actually gets executed in the so someone is just pinging it that audio of the presenter is unavailable, just busy music audible. Is it okay now, my audio, guys? Guys, you can hear me? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so yeah, I see.
You're perfectly audible. Yes, you are audible.
Okay, thank you. So as we see that AngularJS is a client-side framework to create single-page application. When we say it is a client-side framework, all the AngularJS code you write get executed at the client browser. It has nothing to do with your server. Having said that, AngularJS application can work with any server-side technology. So you can create your web API, you can create your services in any server-side technology like ASP.NET or PHP, and you can use them in a single page application being created using AngularJS. Great. So let us move to our next slide. And here you see that these are the main components of AngularJS. I'll just give five seconds to each components to make you understand that AngularJS application got controllers. Controllers are nothing but a JavaScript function which holds your business logic. Scopes are related to a controller, they are related to a directive, and it actually provides the execution context for your application. Next is services. Services you can think of as a singleton class. If you have any data, any business logic or anything you want to persist across the application and want to share across your controllers, then you can use AngularJS services. Directives are another component of AngularJS which gives a special meaning to your HTML element, and using directives even you can create a new kind of HTML element which can be used across your application. Then routing means how you route from one view to another view. Then modules are nothing but kind of namespace in C#. They contains various controller scopes, services, directives inside them. Then we have views. Views are the views which you see in your browser. Then data binding, how you bind data from controller to views is being dealt with data binding. And filters means you have a data on your view, if you want to apply some filter on that, etc. So these are the main components of AngularJS application. Probably today we'll focus on controllers, scopes, services, and data binding, views, and little bit of directives. And we'll give more time on each of these components. Great. So let us start with writing some AngularJS code. So before we go and understand all these components and use them in our application, let us write a very simple AngularJS application and see how it works. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to use Visual Studio here to start our to do the development, and you can use any development environment. You just need a web server and you need a notepad to do AngularJS development. Here I'm going to use Visual Studio, and to use AngularJS along with any IDE, if you need that, feel free to ping us and we will redirect you to the resources which will help you to setting up your development environment other than Visual Studio. And we have blog posts on Infragistic blog as well, in which we have mentioned in a very step-by-step manner that how you can configure Node.js, Sublime Text, Express.js using Bower to set up your development environment for AngularJS. Here I am using Visual Studio, here I am using Visual Studio, but for other platform, feel free to reach us. We'll redirect you to the resources. Okay, so here what I'm doing, I'm just going to create, I have launched Visual Studio and I'm going to create a very simple blank ASP.NET web application. For that, go to web section and then select ASP.NET web application. Give a name of your choice. I'm giving, let us say, infra demo, and then click on OK. Great. You have various options here. If you are coming from .NET background, you must be knowing that waveform is to create ASP.NET application, MVC is to create ASP.NET MVC based application, Web API is to create ASP.NET Web API. We don't need any one of that. We just need a simple ASP.NET Web Server. So I'm going to use empty, and I'm going to select this empty project template, and then we'll click on OK. So here I have created a project which does not have anything. You see here, this is a blank template created using blank template, and it does not contain any files. It is just a plain web server in which I'll be running my Angular application. So to start with, very first what I need to do, I need to go right click on my project and say, hey, manage a NuGet package, and here I'll go and search AngularJS. So you have two ways you can set up AngularJS. First is you can download AngularJS from AngularJS website, and then manually you can add that in your project. Or if you are using Visual Studio, you can use a NuGet package to go to AngularJS and can download a file. So here you see that you have this AngularJS packages in the NuGet. You can go ahead and choose AngularJS and then click on install. It will install AngularJS in your application. So let me launch Notepad here. What I'm saying that you can use Notepad. In that case, you'll have to configure any web server to serve the web app. Another is that to configure Sublime text, Node.js, Express.js using Bower, we will leave you with one of the blog posts on Infragistics blog. There you can find in a step-by-step manner how to set up these for Angular development. Third is that you can use any IDE of your choice, whether Eclipse, Visual Studio, etc. I am using VS. In VS, you can add Angular reference in two ways. First, using NuGet package as I shown you, or second, you can download Angular file from Angular site and then can add them manually. So I hope it is now clear to you, and then whatever concept we are going to talk, will be true for all IDE. So I hope now we are on the same page regarding the IDE. Now let us move ahead. What I have done here, I have installed AngularJS. Just to make my application more immersive, I need Bootstrap. So I'm going to install Bootstrap as well in my application. And again, I can use Bootstrap from NuGet package or from download it and manually add it to my project. So here what I have done, I have added Bootstrap and AngularJS dependency, which you can see over here, that I have added AngularJS dependencies and Bootstrap to my project. Next, what I need to do, I'll go here and say, hey, add a new HTML page. And I'm giving that name as index. Okay, and on this HTML page, as you see on this HTML page, we can call it as demo application. And now to work with AngularJS, we need to have reference of AngularJS library, and that can be done by dragging and dropping angular.min.js over here. So here I have added a dependency of AngularJS min file, and then to make it more immersive, I need bootstrap.css as well, and which I can add from content and then bootstrap.css. So here what I have done, I added in line number 5, I added reference to Angular means.js, and in line number 6, I have added bootstrap.css. Keep in mind that to work with AngularJS, you don't need Bootstrap. I'm adding it just to make my application more immersive. Great. So now I'll go here and say div class as container, and inside this div, I'm calling it, let us say, Angular demo. Great. Now what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to put something like this. Now what it will do, if I ask you this question, what line number 12 is going to render? As you know that in HTML standard, there is no any specified meaning given for two curly braces. So when we try to render it in the browser, any browser will render it as it is. So let us go ahead and run it. And as you can see on your screen that since there is no special meaning for this particular statement is mentioned in HTML, what's happening is that browser is not able to understand that and rendering this as it is. Now let us go ahead and do some changes in our code. Here in my code, now I'll come here and say that, hey, this is not a normal HTML document. This is not a normal HTML document. I want to render it as a ng app. And how I can do that, to render it as a ng app, what I need to do, a very basic, I'll go to the topmost element of my HTML document and set an attribute called ng app. What this attribute does, what ng-app does actually is, it converts this HTML document to an Angular application. ng-app is an Angular directive, and as we talked, Angular directive gives a special meaning to your HTML elements. So by applying this ng-app over here, what it does, it converts this whole HTML document to an Angular app. And inside the Angular app, there is a special meaning for this particular statement, that is 2 plus 5 will be evaluated to the 7. Now if you go ahead and view the output and run it again, you see that now you are getting output here 7, because inside the Angular application there is a special meaning for these two curly braces, and this statement is getting evaluated as an expression, and you are getting a summation of those two numbers as an output. Let us go ahead and try to see something more interesting. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put an input box here. I'll call it input type as text. Okay, now my requirement is very simple. What I want if whatever I type should get printed in the real time. So here, if I go and run my application again, you see I have a input box here, and my requirement is that, let us say if I'm typing here infragistics, that should get rendered somewhere on my DOM in the real time. Now here you can see power of AngularJS, that if you have to do it in other libraries like jQuery or in plain JavaScript, you will have to write a lot of code, like you have to handle the key press event and all those things, and you can do that, but you have to write the code for that. In AngularJS, I can go ahead here and set something called ng model. So ng model is another directive in AngularJS. What ng model does, that it adds the particular element to the current scope. I repeat, ng model is Angular directive which adds this particular variable to the current scope. Right now our Angular application is running in the root scope because we have not provided any scope explicitly. So this application is running in the root scope, and this ng model is adding this name to the root scope. Great. Now since this name is added to the root scope, I can use that anywhere as like this. Now you need to understand here something very interesting, that what's happening in line number 12. In line number 12 we are adding this variable ng model, this name to the root scope, and in the line number 13 we are evaluating the value of name from the root scope and displaying it on the DOM. Now if you go and run this application again, and here I am, and if I start typing something, as you see that in the real time that is getting reflected on your DOM, and it is happening through through Angular two-way data binding to the expression and ng model. So I see there are some comment that my voice is not clear. Can someone please confirm me that whether my voice is clear or not?
It's clear.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so what's happening is that that again, let us go back and try to understand this code. This is very important. This 4 lines of code, if we understand it, our Angular journey would be easier. What here actually happening, I repeat that by ng model directive, we are adding this name to the current scope. Right now we have not defined any current scope for this particular div. So what's happening, that this name is getting added to the root scope. Each AngularJS application having one root scope which is associated with this ng app, right? And then we are evaluating the value of name from the root scope and under this expression and displaying it in line number 13. So this is the way Angular works, and as you see that even to get a two-way binding is very simple, and we have not written any JavaScript and code behind, and we have a very simple application which is having two-way binding, and that's in front of us. I see there are many technical questions coming in. I will definitely try to answer them once we complete our webinar at 4 p.m. So we will have a Q&A from 4 to 4:15, and if we are not able to answer all those questions in 15 minutes, we'll save these questions and then we'll publish answers of these questions on the blog post. purpose. So please, request you that keep coming your questions. Feel free to raise your question, and if your question is not getting answered, don't worry about that. We'll definitely answer them whenever possible. Thank you so much. Great. So here we have seen a very simple Angular application. Someone is asking there that how it is happening, how any changes is getting detected, etc. You'll understand when we move further. So what you see so far that we worked on the view and controller. I'm going to show you that how to write controller, but assume controller is a JavaScript function which holds your business logic, which holds data of your application, and view and controller talks to each other using a JavaScript object called a scope. So it's very simple. Controller adds data and business logic to a scope object. A scope object passes that data and business logic to view. If something changes on the view on that data, a scope gets that data back, that changes back from the view and update to the controller in the digest loop. So a scope object is very important. A scope object, $scope serves as the glue between controller and the view. View and the controller both have access of the scope object. The scope pass data and behavior to the view from the controller, and a scope provides execution context for the DOM and the expression. Like in the previous demo, if you notice, I'm explaining you block number 4 or the leftmost block in the second row, that a scope provides execution context for the DOM in the expression. So always your Angular application is running inside an execution context. If you don't have any execution context provided to your application explicitly, your Angular app runs in global execution context. In previous example, we saw that we did not have any explicit execution context, but my application was running in the global execution context. And in the global execution context, we have a scope called rootScope. And using ng model directive, we were adding that name to the rootScope, and Angular was attaching a watch to that particular rootScope, that particular property in the rootScope, and whenever any changes was happening, Angular was notifying that to the view. Then the scope object is plain JavaScript object. We can add and remove property as required. For each control creation and a new scope gets created. I'm sorry for the typo there. It is creation or new scope gets created. So if you have a controller A and you are using that controller 10 times on your view, there would be 10 scope gets created for the controller. Next, the rootScope object. The rootScope is the topmost scope on DOM element with ng app directive, and we saw this sample, this demo in the previous demo that we are always having a rootScope. In Angular, all the scope are created with the prototypal inheritance. What does it mean is that all the scope object which we will create will have access to rootScope. And a controller can nest another controller inside that, and then the scope of those two controllers will follow the prototypal inheritance. Great. Then a scope has access to their parent scope object and eventually to the rootScope object. We'll see that in demo in a while. Then rootScope object is parent of all the scope object. So these 4 points are very important about your about the rootScope. Then controller in AngularJS, a scope object and controller are very much tightly coupled to each other in AngularJS. Controller is a JavaScript constructor function which contains data and the business logic. When you say constructor function, it means if you use a controller 10 times on a view, 10 object of that controller will get created. So that's why controller is a JavaScript constructor function. Controller name should start from the capital letter and ends with controller. For example, author controller. So this is not a rule, but this is the standard you should follow. That if you are writing a controller called, let us say, employee controller, E should be capital and controller should be appended to the employee controller. Each controller takes a scope object as parameter and attach data and behavior to the scope object. Great. Then do not use controller to manipulate DOM or create custom filters. So I have seen many times people do this mistake. They try to manipulate DOM or try to create a custom filter inside the controller function. You must not do it. The reason behind that is that a controller are supposed to be tested in the isolation. So if any dependency on your DOM in the controller, you cannot test your controller, without having the view. So the best practice is your controller should contain only the data and the business logic, such that you can unit test your business logic without having view or any external dependency. Great. Each controller has its own child scope object. Right now you'll see in the demo that when we create a controller, we pass a scope object as a parameter to that. So each controller has its own scope object. Whenever new controller gets created on the view, Angular passes a scope object to it. As we mentioned earlier, that if you are using a controller 10 times, there will be 10 scope object created for the controller on the view. A controller can be attached to the different level of DOM, hence it creates a scope hierarchy. So it is very straightforward. You can attach a controller to a div, you can attach a controller to a nested div, or a child div which is inside a parent div, and hence controller will create a hierarchy with the parent div. A scope of the child controller can access and override data and behavior of the parent controller. Great. So let us write to code to understand how controller and scope object works, how to work with controller hierarchy, and how to work with nested controller. Great. So don't worry about that. Any question you have, we will answer that. And once we will complete these 3 demo, I'll again come back and walk you through the slide of controller and scope. And I strongly believe that many of your queries will get answered after the demo. So let us go back to our application again. And what I'm going to do, I will add an index.js in this. So I'll say that, hey, add a new JavaScript file and call this as index.js. Okay, and to work with the IntelliSense, I'll drag and drop Angular file over there, and I need to refer that AngularJS, that index.js on my HTML. So for that, I'll go and drag and drop this guy over here. Great. Now let us go ahead and write some controller inside index.js. Always remember that you cannot have a controller or a service or a directive hanging here and there. They must be part of some module. And how you can create a module is very simple. To create a module, just go and say var, I'm going to create an author app module. So I'll say var author app equal to Angular dot module. Great. So this is the syntax, and as you see that Angular.module takes 3 parameters, like name of the module, all the dependency which is required in this particular module, and the configuration. I'm going to give name as, let us say, author app, and after that you need to pass all the dependency of this particular module, and that should be passed inside a JavaScript array. Right now I don't have any dependencies, that's why you see this JavaScript array is empty. Let me take 30 seconds and explain you what does it mean. If you go to a normal C++ program or normal C# program, let us say you want to use a particular class and that is part of some other namespace. What you do, first you add that namespace using the using attribute, using keyword in C#. In the same way, using include, you add that in C++, right? So in the same way here, inside this author app module, let us say I want to use a module called ABC module. I'll have to pass that module here, such that all the functions, controllers, or anything which is part of this ABC module, I can use them inside this author app module. So here in this particular, as a second parameter inside the JavaScript array, you pass all the dependencies of this author app module. Now here what Angular does, that only you need to pass that dependency, and Angular will take care of injecting them inside your application using the dependency injection. So what dependency injection does, that if you have a dependency on some object, rather than you create that object, you delegate this task to someone else to create that object, and that is roughly a dependency injection. So here if I need let us say ABC module, and this is a dependency over here, and rather than I go ahead and create instance of ABC module inside this author app, Angular will take care of creating that object and give it to author app module whenever required. So this is how dependency injection roughly works in AngularJS. Keep in mind this author app and this author app, these two name, I mean it is your choice that you can have it as the same name or different name. It is not mandatory, but a standard is that you should give this both names same. We are going to use this name inside the JavaScript file, and we will use this name on the view. Great. So this is where we have created a module. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a controller, and a controller can be created in a very simple way. To create a controller, again, that is a JavaScript function. I can go and say, hey, create a controller for me, and I can give the name of that controller as author app dot controller, as you see here. And again, controller takes a first parameter is name of the controller, and as we talked, names should start from a capital letter and prefix suffix with the controller. So I can call it as author controller. As a second parameter, it takes a function, and always a controller function takes a scope object as parameter. So what we are doing here in line number 5, we are creating a controller called author controller, which is part of author app module. Name of the controller is author controller, and it does not have any external dependency, this particular controller. And make sure that you always pass this scope object to the controller. That is the syntax. Now inside this controller we can add data, we can add business logic. Great. So how we can add data here? So to add a data, let us say I want to have a list of authors. What I can say is scope dot authors equal to, this could be a JavaScript array, and inside the JavaScript array we can say that, okay, let us say I'm calling it as name JSON. So you see that I'm just creating a very simple JavaScript array which has only one property called name. So here I can go and put more name. After this comma, I can go and say that, okay, I have one more name, as these are the authors, name Glenn Block, name Dan Valin. Great. So right now what I have done, I have added one JavaScript array as a data to this scope object. Okay, so we have our data in the author controller. Now let us see that how we can use this author controller data, which is this scope author, on the view. And that is very easy to do. Go to the view, and in the view, let us go ahead and create a new div. Okay, inside this div, we want to, since we want to use this particular author controller, we need to set the context using a directive called ng controller, and then set that particular name of that controller, which is author controller. Now inside this div, you have a separate scope object. The scope object, which is attached to this particular controller, is visible inside this div. So now we can say that this particular div is not hanging around root scope, it is hanging in the scope object, which is attached to this author controller. Great, so now we have attached that author controller. Now to display that record, what we can say, hey, take an unordered list, and inside the unordered list, we can use another directive called ng repeat, and that could be a in authors. So ng repeat is another directive. What it does, it repeats that particular element, and we have been talking that a directive gives a can give a special meaning to your HTML element. And then here authors is name of your data, and a is your variable. So once you have this, what we can say that hey, render a dot name, and as you see that we have name over here. So what would happen is that inside this particular div, the execution context is a scope of this author controller, and inside that scope we have this authors, and inside that author name is the property, and using ng repeat we will repeat this li to the number of times these items are, and then we are displaying this name. So that's it. Now if you go and run this, but before running that we need to set one more property. We'll go here and say ng app is equal to this particular author app, because author controller is part of author app, and we need to explicitly mention that with the ng app. Now if you go and run this, hopefully if everything is fine, you see that here you are getting a list of authors from the controller to the view. Now something very interesting I want to explain you here is that you see that this particular JavaScript file does not have any dependency on the view. It does not have any dependency with the view, so it can be tested using any JavaScript unit test framework separately without the view. And this is a very much, we can test this particular controller without having the view. And on the other hand, if I go to the view, this view does not have, this view can be tested using any UI testing tool as well without having the JavaScript. So this is the advantage of AngularJS. Now if I go here and see that how we can work with the filter, let us say we are typing this ng model name here. I'll say that hey, apply a filter, and filter can be applied with the pipe operator, and then say filter, and then we'll give this name here. Now if you go and run this application, and I don't want this name to be printed there. Now if you go and run this application, what I have done in line number 17, I just applied a filter. So here filter is a keyword that can be applied using the pipe, and name is coming from here. Whatever user will type in this input text box of line number 13, this list will get filtered on basis of that. Now if I go and run my application again, and you see this, as I type down, it is printing, it is filtering down. If I type JSON, it is filtering JSON, and so on. And so this is happening. How? Let us see that. Step one, what we are doing here is that we are adding this name to the root scope, right? Root scope object have access to this name. Now inside this div has its own scope from the author controller. We are accessing the name which is part of root scope over here, and filtering this list. So we can conclude that a scope has access to the root scope by seeing this example. And as you see, this is very simple to work with. Now, if I go back and again very quickly, if I can very quickly show you controller and scope, it would be very clear to you that see, view and controller are talking to each other using the scope object. You will agree with me. Then a scope is serving as a glue between controller and the view. View and controller both have access of the scope object, and for each controller creation, a new scope gets created. Let me show you this. I'll go here and just copy paste this div over here again. But in this div, I'm not applying this filter. Great. And then again, I run this application. You see that now I am getting this result twice because I have two div. This is div 1, this is div 2. Here I have applied a filter, whereas here I have not applied a filter. Now I go and start typing some name over there. You see that div 1 is getting filtered, whereas div 2 is not getting filtered. What message I'm trying to convey you here is that when you use a controller on your view, if you use controller 2 times in your view, there are 2 scope gets created. So this is a scope 1 and this is a scope 2, since we are using it twice on our view. Great. Now very quickly, let me go ahead and show you that how you can work with controller hierarchy. And for that, what I have done here is that, let me just go and create something called, I'll go here and inside this, I'll go and create one more controller. Let us say I'm calling that controller as author app controller, and I'm calling that as a counter controller. Okay, that again takes a function. That counter controller is taking a functional scope, or better, I'll go ahead and just respecting time, and I'm copying pasting some code from my reference. So I'll go here, and what I'm doing, I'm creating a new controller called my controller. This name should be capital. Great. And instead of my controller, let's give some meaningful name here. I'm calling it as a counter controller. Okay, and this is another way syntax to create a controller. You explicitly mention all the dependency here, and in the function scope, what I'm doing, I am having a counter as a data, and then these add and sub are the two behavior. I'm attaching behavior. In previous example, what we saw, we had only the data. Here I'm having a add behavior and a sub behavior inside the counter controller. Now let us go ahead, and what we are going to do on the view, let us go on the view, and on the view we have this div which is using the counter controller. Okay, and here we have 2 buttons, plus and minus. When we click on them, we are calling, so when we click on this add plus button, we are calling using the ng click directive, we are calling the add behavior of the scope object, whereas when we click on this minus, we are calling sub behavior of the scope object. Now if you go and run this application, as you see here, now I have a counter and then plus and minus. When I click on this plus, what's happening here is that this scope object is getting, this scope add behavior is getting called. When I click on this minus, what happens is that this scope sub gets called. Now let us go back and run this application again, and as you see that like we can even call a function which is part of the controller using the scope on the view. Now to understand that how each controller has its own scope, probably we can go ahead here, and to show it better, I'll just take this Control C and then put it here again. Now if I go and run this application again, you see that it is I mean twice I'm using the same controller in 2 different view div. Now here when I click, the data of only scope 1 is getting changed, whereas data of a scope 2 is as it is. And this is the message I'm trying to convey you, that once you use a controller many times, their scope are separate, as you see in this particular demo. So scope 2 counter is now set to -4, whereas scope 1 counter is set to 5. So now I hope this is clear to you. Now let me go ahead and show you that how you can work with parent and child controller. And for that, what I'm going to do, I'm going to add more controller to my application. So here inside my, what I have done, I am adding a controller called parent controller. Great. In the parent controller, I have two data in line number 20 and line number 29. You see the data one is like I'm attaching a name and age, DJ and 32, and then I have a child controller. In the child controller, what I'm doing, I am overriding the age. You see I'm giving a new age value here, and then I'm setting the grade, and grade can be set as, let us say, A plus. Great. So again, you see that these controller are not related to each other here. It's just happening is that I have a property called age in the both parent controller and the child controller. Don't get confused. This name I have just given so that you understand it better. And parent controller has a scope dot name DJ, whereas child controller does not have a scope dot name. A child controller has a scope dot grade, whereas parent controller does not have a scope dot age grade. And parent controller and child controller both have a scope dot age. So we have these two controller, and as we talked that we can use this controller anywhere on the div, on the view. What I'm doing here is that let us say I have a div here, and as you see that what's happening is that great. So what you see here in line number, focus from line number 33 to 40, I have a div. Okay. In the div, I am displaying age. So you see that this particular age expression will get evaluated from the scope of parent controller. So probably we'll get output here 32, right? And then we have another div, and this div is nested inside the div of the parent controller, and it is attached to the child controller. And since it is nested inside the parent controller, it can access the name, it can render its own age, and it can access and it can render its own grade. So what would happen is that when this particular div will get rendered, Angular will try to find this name property inside the scope of child controller. Of course, Angular will not get this name property inside the scope of this child controller. Angular will move further to the tree and go to the parent controller, which is this parent controller, and try to find name in the scope of parent controller. And in this scenario, it will find name over there. So you will get name printed from the parent controller. And in this manner, it goes up to the root controller to find the value of a property. If it does not get, you don't get any exception, simply that value would not get printed. So now if I go ahead and run this application over here, okay, so I guess I might have done some mistakes. So it should be, instead of my app, it should be actually author app controller and author app controller. Now let us go and run it again. And as you see here is that we have div 32, div DJ. So 32 is coming from the parent controller. DJ is coming from the parent controller, but we are displaying it inside the child div. 22 is coming from the child container controller, and A positive is coming, A plus is coming from the child controller. Great. So this is how the controller parent and child controller works. Great. I see there are many questions that whether this video and PPT and source code will be available. So don't worry, recorded webinar, all the source code which we are writing over here and presentation along with all the study material will be available for download. Okay. Great. So now this is done. Let us now move to our slide. I see there are many good questions coming in, and I would love to answer them once this is done. And feel free to reach out to us even after webinar. We'll definitely try to help you out. Okay, great. So definitely we can do more webinars on detail of controller and directive. As you see that this was a simplified AngularJS, so it was very much level 100. But anyway, let us move to our next topic, and our next topic is probably okay, so we learned about a scope object, rootScope controller. We saw controller scope object, controller hierarchy, nested controller. Now let us see that how service in AngularJS works. You see that controllers are a constructor function. Like if you use a controller 10 times, 10 object of controller will get created. We just saw that in the demo. Whereas services are exactly opposite of controller. Services are singleton object in Angular application. Services are used to organize and share data and function across the application. Services provides methods to communicate data across the controller in a consistent way. Then service is a singleton object, and it gets instantiated only once per application using the injector. Services are lazy instantiated and gets created when Angular app component needs it. Then there are many inbuilt services like $HTTP, $Q can be used as it is. So if you want to make a JAX call, probably you may want to use inbuilt HTTP service. There are 5 different ways a custom service can be created. So as we saw that controller is a controller is an instance object. Like if you use a controller 10 times, 10 object would be created. Service object will be created only once. So if you want to share a data or share something across the application, in those scenarios you will be you should use service. Also keep in mind that the object of service, instance of service will be created by Angular only when you need them. So services are lazy instantiated. You can create a service in AngularJS in 5 different ways. The most popular are service factory, service method, factory method, and then provider method, value method, and constant method. Today in the webinar, we'll see that how to use service method and factory method. So let us write code to understand service, how to write a service using the service method, how to write a service using the factory method, and then how we can use a HTTP service to perform AJAX operation, and then I'll show you that how to perform a CRUD operation. Okay, so quickly what I'm going to do to write a service, let me get back to my application here. Okay, and great. So a service can be calculated. Always keep in mind that you should have your controller in one JS file, your service in another JS file, your directives in another JS file. I see many people merge them together, which is not a good idea. So now I want to create a service, and let us say to create a service, what I'll do, I'll go here and say, hey, add a new JavaScript file, and I'll call it as, let us say, author service.js. So here I have created author service.js, and such that my IntelliSense works, I'll go ahead and drag and drop Angular mean over here. Great. So once that is done, I'm going to put my service inside a module. And that is done like this. So what I'm doing here is that I'm saying that, hey, create a module called calculator service. Again, like how we created a module for the application, like angular.module calculator service. And using the service method, we are creating a service called calculator that has only, and that service has a function which returns a square of the number. So whatever, well, and that calculator service has a function called a square, which returns a square of a number. So this is the simplest way you can create a service. Now you have this service, how you can use this in your controller, because you know that we can pass data to a controller only using the we can pass data from a view only using the controller. Now what I can do to use this, probably what we can do, we can go to our application, take this calculator service here, and as we talk that to, if we want to use any another module, first we need to pass that here. So here we'll pass it, that calculator service. Once that is passed, the next thing which we need to do, let us say we want to create a calculator controller, that can be done here. Author app, we can come here and say that, hey, create a author app controller with the name calculator controller. And as you see that inside this function, along with the scope, I'm passing calculator as well. And calculator is a service which is part of calculator service module. So first I passed as a dependency calculator service module over here. And then what I'm doing, I'm passing calculator service here. Then inside this calculator controller, I'm writing a behavior called find a square, and inside the find a square, I'm calling calculator.square. And as you see that to call a method on the calculator service, we are not creating instance, but we are calling it directly, because as we talked, calculator is a singleton object. And inside that, we are passing a scope.number as a parameter to make it a square. So this is the way you can use a service in the controller. Now on the div, let us go that we have a div over here. Go to this div, and what we'll do, okay, so what I'm going to do here in this div, so what I have done, that I'm using the calculator controller over here. I'm saying that, hey, enter a number, and then binding that to a number property in the scope of calculator controller. And then we are just, on the ng click, we are calling the find a square, which is here. And then this number will be passed as a parameter, which is here. And then we are rendering the answer over here. Since if you go, we are setting the answer here. So let's go and run this application. So before running, let me put this div. And if I go and run this application again, okay, so we are getting this exception because I forget to add the JavaScript file on my index.html. Here I'm using this index.js, but before that I need to go ahead and use authorservice.js as well. Great. So now if we go ahead and run this application, okay, we should see that how our services are running. So here you see that I have an enter a number. Probably if I click here and click on a square, you see that I'm getting output here 9. So just to summarize that, what the steps I have done to create a service. First I created a JavaScript file, and inside that I'm creating a service module, and then using the service method I'm creating a service called calculator, and inside that there's a function called a square, which is returning square of a passed number. Then to use it in the main module, first we need to pass that as a dependency, which I'm passing over here. Then if I want to use that particular service inside a controller, I need to pass that there as a dependency, and then I'm using that over here. Then on my view, first I need to add reference of that JS file, and then I'm just using the controller to use the service. So this is the way you can use a service method to create a service. Now let me quickly go ahead and show you that how you can create a service using the factory method. So here I have a calculator service. I'll go here. And here you see that what I'm saying, that calculator service dot factory string manipulation takes a function, and it is having a reverse string function, which it is returning a reverse string function, and which is taking a string parameter and then returning that. So this is a two-way you can create a service. Always remember that if you use a factory method, what it does, it actually returns the function after evaluating that, and when you use a service method, it actually returns the object. So this is the main difference between creating a service using the factory method and the service method. Great. Now I'm quickly going to show you that how you can use a service to make a JAX call, and this should be the last demo, and I have already created that. So what you see here is that like I have a index, I have a services.js. Inside the services.js, what I'm doing, I have created a module called a student service. Very simple, line number 1. Then I'm creating a service called a student data op. In that I need to use HTTP inbuilt service, so I'm passing that as a dependency. Then this is the base URL of my my WCF REST service, which is returning JSON. Then I am attaching a method called getStudents. Inside the getStudent methods, what I'm doing, I'm returning, I'm making a get call using the HTTP service, and then in the add student, I'm making a post call, passing the start parameter, and then here from this student data op service, I'm returning this student data op object. Great. So once this is done, I'll go to demo.js. In the demo.js, what I'm doing, I'm creating a module called my_app. Inside my_app, I'm passing a student service as a dependency. Then I'm creating a student controller. Inside a student controller, I'm creating a getStudents function, and the getStudent function is using a student data op and calling getStudents. On the success, it is setting a scope of students as a starts, and in the same way, it is calling the add student, where I'm creating a JavaScript object, and then I'm pushing the I'm calling add student by passing this parameter. Whereas on the index.html, what I'm doing is very simple. Here I have a normal form which takes a parameter first name and last name to insert the data. On the click of add a student, we are calling add a student from the student controller, and then inside a bootstrap table, I am displaying these the record from the database, that is first name and last name. So now when I go and run this is pretty simple. On your screen, you can see that I have the data coming from my database, and that got edit and delete button. This is a bootstrap table. I can go ahead and add a name here. Let us say infragistics, and infragistics are okay, call add a student. Probably I'll find that a student should get added. For some reason it is not getting referenced, but that is okay. So this is how you can use $HTTP inbuilt service to make a call to your web services. I see we are 10 minutes past to the webinar. I'll take last 5 minutes before I jump to the question and answer panel. We'll definitely do more webinars when we go deeper into AngularJS and other aspect of web development along with Ignite UI. But I hope today was useful to you. We covered basic of AngularJS, and it will help you in getting started. Just overview of directives. So directives are, they attach a specified behavior to existing DOM element or create a new element. Directive can modify the behavior of a particular DOM element or add a new custom element on the DOM. Other thing is that as you see that always your directive names should be in the camel case, and you can use them on the view separated by comma or underscore, separated by dash, underscore, or colon. So you see that we have been seeing a directive, like if you use a ng show directive with a div, and if that value is true, it actually either will show that directive or it will not show that particular div. So we can say that that directive gives a special meaning to your HTML element, or it creates a new element. Directives can be used as an attribute, as can be used as an element, it can be used as a comment, or it can be used as a class. There are three scopes. So this is not a scope object. This is scopes in directives. Those are shared scope, inherited scope, and isolated scope. In shared scope, your directive and your controller share the data. In inherited scope, they share the data, but any changes in the directive will not go back to the controller. Whereas in the isolated scope, your directive and controller has different scope and data is not shared. So what you see on your screen here is that if it is shared scope, you see that controller data is shared in the directive, whereas if it is isolated scope, controller data is not shared. So probably we'll do one more webinar where we go deeper into the directives and other aspect of AngularJS. Great. You can use isolated local in the isolated scope. You can use local scope properties like @rate equal to an ampersand to access the data, @rate to access string value, equal to access object in the two-way binding way, and ampersand character to bind the external function. Anyway, so this is Q&A panel, but before I go, let us thank to Infragistic for this webinar. Infragistic, so I'm presenting this webinar on behalf of Infragistic, and if you're not aware what is Infragistic, it is one of the leading provider of development tools, and we have Ignite UI, which you must go and check it out. It will help you in speeding up your web development, whether you do it in jQuery or in other web technologies. We welcome you to take advantage of our free 30 days trial by downloading the product at infragistic.com/product/ultimate/download. If you need any further help, you feel free to send me an email or tweet. I'll try to help you on that. If you have attended today's webinar and if you are going to buy any license of Infragistic, you are going to get this 10% discount. So you just need to mention that, hey, I have attended this webinar and you are willing to attend more webinar, you are going to get discount. So it is a win-win position, right? You are learning free of cost and you are getting discount as well. And this is the vision of Infragistic, right? I mean, they really want to enable each one of you buy their product, by evangelizing and by everything they can. If you have any question, you can reach to sales-india@infragistics.com for any follow-up question you may have, and we'll definitely love to assist you. And at the same time, my name is Dhananjay Kumar, and if you have any query, you can send me. My email address is, which I'm putting it here. If you want, you can note it down. My email is debugmode@outlook.com. I'm on Twitter as debug_mode. So feel free to reach me on these two. And along with, you can send a mail to sales as mentioned here. You can send an email to India Sales, and that email ID is sales-india@infragistic.com as well. And don't forget that if you buy something before 30th April, you are going to get 10% discount if you have attended this webinar. So guys, this is from my side for this webinar. I know that time was less, but hope it helps you. And I'm looking forward to see you again in upcoming webinar. And thank you so much on the behalf of Infragistic to each one of you for attending this webinar. Feel free to be in touch. Download our product from infragistic.com. Use the trial version. If you have any feedback, give it to us. And reach out to us on the given email address. So now I'm going to stop the recording and take your question one by one from the Q&A panel. Once again, thank you so much, each one of you. We really appreciate it.